Hello, and welcome to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. On today's show, I had Katie Wyatt, violist, CEO, and co founder of Kidznotes, a highly successful El Sistema youth orchestra program right here in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. If you're not familiar with what El Sistema is, it's the well known and successful Venezuelan youth orchestra program in which Gustavo Dudamel, music director of the LA Phil, trained in as a child. I was so excited to have Katie on the show because we met way back in '07 when she worked for the North Carolina Symphony in the education department. Back then, I didn't know a whole lot about what she was doing, but on the show, I got to hear all about what she did and how her experience working there impacted her to go into more educational work and what prompted her to get interested in the El Sistema program, and then go and study and learn all about it and come back here and create a program right here in Raleigh. The best thing is she gives advice and information about how to do that. If you're interested in doing that in your area, you can find out about that right now on this program. But before we get started, I want to thank Fix Music for providing the hosting for the show. When you're looking for high quality sheet music at affordable prices, look no further than fixmusic.com. And get this, they are making so many improvements to their site. Starting now, they have lots of music for all the strings, as well as continuing to add music for winds and brass. They've improved the checkout to use real-time quotes for priority, 2 to 3 days, and priority express overnight shipments. And unlike many of their competitors, they don't pad these methods to make more money. If you need it fast, they will get it to you as cheaply as possible. They also started piloting a program where they can set up a portal for schools and teachers. Teachers can pick the music that appears and they can get it to their students directly through their own website, and they can get a much better price and get it much faster. So if you're interested in that program, you can contact them through their site and find out a lot more about that. And for Crushing Classical listeners, just for you, you can get 10% off your order right now by using the code CRUSH on your order. Check them out right now at fixmusic.com. This was a fantastic chat that I had with Katie, so stay tuned. Let's get started. Hey, Katie, how are you?
I'm great, Tracy. How are you?
I'm fine. So it's so great to have you on the podcast. Katie, you and I worked together at the North Carolina Symphony a little bit, like when you played viola there a little bit, right? Kind of as a
I did.
sub, and then yeah, but then you were also working in the education department too.
That's right. I was director of education and community engagement, and I had a chance to sub in a few times. I hope to still have a chance to sub in the future. Still playing viola, and my first real job, I'd say, was with the North Carolina Symphony as the director there.
Cool. So, yeah, like you say, you still want to play. It's hard. I mean, was your original career path to be in an orchestra on the audition path, trying to get a job as a player, or what? Did you always know you wanted to do education?
No, I had no idea. So definitely I was on the professional orchestral musician path. I went to Indiana and then the Cleveland Institute for my master's, and then I played in the New World Symphony for a couple of years. And all through that time, I was preparing for auditions, taking auditions, doing pretty well, making it to the finals of some good major orchestras in my mid to early 20s. And I was happy, but I was also always doing something else. I was always organizing concerts or putting together a series or thinking about, some of the major events that were happening during that time. 9/11, I got really involved in organizing some of the concerts around raising money for firefighters and policemen. And then I also got really involved after the tsunami and raised a bunch of money. Then and in organizing those events, I was on fire. I just felt like all of a sudden we were using music to make a big difference and a bigger difference than what I had experienced thus far. while I was at the New World Symphony, I won an audition to be part of the Youth Orchestra of the Americas, which is a international exchange program between the United States, Canada, Mexico, and many of the countries in South America.
Oh, cool.
And I won a spot in the viola section, you go to Venezuela and you rehearse in Venezuela before you tour all of Latin America. And you spend about a week there. And while I was there, you have to re-audition for seats. So you get in and then you have to re-audition for chairs. And I was in the New World Symphony at the time. I had just auditioned and made it to the finals of the Detroit Symphony. I felt like I was doing really well. And then I was beat out for principal by this 16-year-old girl. And she was from Caracas. She was amazing. She is now in the Simón Bolívar Orchestra, and just knocked me off of my feet. And what blew me away the most was that then I met her, and then I met a number of her friends who were all from El Sistema and had grown up in El Sistema in Venezuela. And they were all amazing. And they had all come from really tough financial and social situations where this was truly my first experience in a third world environment. Mm-hmm. And I was just blown away by the level of excellence with which they held themselves and the level of excellence that was demanded from them in spite of their environment and in spite of significant challenges facing them. There were no excuses. There was no like, oh, I can't get home, because the bus was 3 hours late or whatever. It was just a standard of excellence and an overcoming that blew my mind. And then I was introduced to the entire system of El Sistema, where they were training hundreds of thousands of young people across the country at a scale that was just kind of mind-blowing, where you would drive into these tiny communities where there's nothing in town. There's no street lights, there's no street signs or stoplights or any major businesses, and yet there's an orchestra. You walk into town, you get dropped off on this bus, and you just ask like the guy working at the gas station, where's the youth orchestra? And he'll tell you, oh, it's around the corner, and they meet in the church on Sundays. And it's an incredible movement and something that has truly been embraced by communities across Venezuela. And now that I've been in it and have learned so much more about El Sistema, it's really an international movement for social change. And it's one of the most thriving and driven and fast growing movements that I've ever experienced that has maintained a level of commitment and mastery and isn't diluted. I feel like there's a lot of great things that you can become a part of that eventually just turn into being like a website or t-shirts or a podcast or something, where it's like, I don't know, other like Occupy Wall Street, for example, like
right.
it out on Wall Street, it was amazing. And then in other parts of the country, as it kind of grew and was adopted, I would say it wasn't amazing everywhere. I remember seeing a lot of people with like their Starbucks coffee, just like hanging, what appeared to just be hanging out. And I feel like El Sistema is an example of everywhere that it is. You really do see this devotion to the core principles of, access for those who wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity, mastery and excellence demanded by all of the young musicians that are participating, trying to perform at a really high level, classical music that is beloved by everyone once people have a chance to hear it and become a part of it. So that was really what inspired me to go into this new career path. So I came back from Venezuela and just wanted to do something more, wanted to see what else I could grow and build in our own country, and got some experience through the League of American Orchestras. I did a management fellowship with them. Then I got my first job with the North Carolina Symphony as the director of education.
Mm-hmm.
And while there, it became 2009 and 2008 and 2009 when the big recession hit and the housing boom market collapsed. And we went through, I'm sure you remember, Tracy, we went through a lot of cuts. The symphony the players took cuts, the administration took pay cuts. I had to move because I couldn't afford my apartment anymore with the monthly salary that I was making. They cut our insurance, they cut our retirement plan. It was tough. And I was 28 at the time. And I had done a lot to grow a lot of programs at the symphony. I created the pub concerts that we have now. I really built out the chamber music series. I designed a whole new curriculum for the ensembles in the schools.
I remember that.
I had done a
You had
lot.
people going out. I remember you had people going out it was separate from the regular education program, like that.
Exactly. Because I felt like we weren't doing enough in communities. I felt like the one-off giant concert for every fourth grader just wasn't making a difference. It wasn't really doing enough. And so I was doing all that I could to like deepen the symphony's engagement and relevance in communities.
How is that received? Like when you come in and try to make a whole bunch of new things, and is it hard to do that within an existing,
Definitely. And I would say it was hard with the musicians and with the administration. It was hard from both parts of the orchestra. And
Really?
I would say where it was easiest was in the community. The community was desperate to have to have these resources. And I had to think of, as creative as I possibly could be, because the North Carolina Symphony is a great example where it's a centralized body, but you're really trying to serve the state. So you're really trying to make our work relevant, even in Rocky Mount, which is 2 hours away.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to do all kinds of things, technology ideas, travel ideas, residency ideas, all these ideas.
Well, you were really rocking the boat. I'm sure you were pissing a lot of people off.
Yeah, it was fun. It was certainly met with, and I was a little bit younger than I was. I'm 36 now, and I was 28 then, and it was certainly met with like, oh, aren't you young and full of energy? Don't you have just so much to? Yeah, isn't that cute? Don't you have so much to offer?
Yeah. And
so
I remember. Yeah. Personally, when I was in my 20s, I was like, I'll do anything. Screw it, Yeah. And as you get older, you start to notice the resistance or your own resistance, and you're like, it's easier just to not rock the boat,
Yeah.
So that was going on, and you were really making some waves there. And then what had you, decide to leave and move on and start what you've started now?
So while there, the recession hit, and I was starting to look at opportunities to continue to grow, personal growth. And I applied for and won the TED Prize Fellowship when Maestro Abreu, the creator of El Sistema, Jose Antonio Abreu, was honored as the 2009 TED Prize winner. And with that prize came a bunch of money to create a fellowship for 50 young musicians and leaders to go to the New England Conservatory and back to Venezuela to be immersed in El Sistema, to then come back to the United States and start El Sistema inspired programs. So I won that. I went to the North Carolina Symphony and I said, hey, I'm really excited. I've won this thing. They hadn't even heard of TED Talks at the time. So I had to explain like what TED Talks were and that it was a big deal. And then, I said, I want to go away and I want to do this fellowship. And then I want to come back to the North Carolina Symphony and I want to start this El Sistema program. And it's going to be amazing. And they were like, no, thank you, but it's a very convenient time for you to leave and we won't fill your position. So,
wow, really?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember. So that position, the director of education position, went unfilled for 3 years.
Oh,
and
yeah,
didn't.
I think this is ringing a bell because we were like, what? Like they're not gonna
Yeah.
I remember that,
Yeah.
yeah. And so,
Yeah.
but so you essentially were like, I want to bring this amazing thing here, and they were like, nah.
Yeah, it was tough though. I mean, yes, that is what happened. It was tough because it was a tough time financially. You know,
Right.
everyone was pulling back. And the idea, it certainly, I had started looking because they had also started to pull back all the programs that I
Right.
created. And then here I am with like, and then I want to add this whole new giant thing, which I think will really take us into the future. And they couldn't see it. And one thing that I have learned is certainly in any organization, you need people like me who are very risk friendly and risk tolerant,
Hmm.
and to be guided and have a safety rail with a group of more conservative people. I mean, otherwise, my ideas would just kind of spin out and spin out and spin out, and perhaps not ever have the grounding that they really need. And so I think it probably was the right decision of the symphony at the time. But unfortunately, they also missed out on a huge opportunity, which is now that Kidznotes is hugely successful locally.
Yeah.
So I came back from the fellowship, started Kidznotes in 2010. I spent that fellowship year fundraising and doing some fundraising, kind of flying back and forth. So I would have class at the New England Conservatory for a week, and then I would come back and I would have all these pictures and stories and things that I had learned. And I had connected with an incredible woman locally, Lucia Poe, who was in her 80s, who had seen the 60-minute special about El Sistema and had called the fellowship and said, if they can do this in Venezuela, I want to see us do it in Durham. And so she and
That's
I,
awesome.
yeah, she and I teamed up, and she would host a tea at her house or invite me to join her for book club or Rotary or garden club. And I would make my pitch, and we raised about $25,000 in that pilot, in that kind of exploratory year. And
Wow.
then I started Kidznotes the following summer, so July 2010, with a
Wow.
budget. I created a budget of 150,000, and we raised 300,000 that year and enrolled 60 kids in all violin in that very first year. So it was an entirely, totally just violin program.
Hmm.
Since then, we've now enrolled 415 kids annually, and we teach all of the instruments of the orchestra.
Every single
So it
instrument.
has, yeah, except we don't teach bassoon yet. So some of the bigger, more expensive instruments we haven't started teaching, but we just bought a marimba. So our percussion section has marimba now, and we just bought a few double basses. We teach oboe, we teach clarinet. So I'm excited to add bassoon next.
So it's really grown. So, you just started, it seems like everything kind of lined up because you went to Venezuela for this other program and then were exposed to El Sistema and then came back. And I don't know, it just sort of, it seems like it was meant to be, like it lined up so that you could work that out. Because how did that other woman, how did you meet her? The one who saw the thing on 60 Minutes.
She had been calling the fellowship. So
Oh,
she had found out that there was this fellowship. She lives in Durham. I was living in Raleigh at the time. Boston, where the fellowship was hosted, called me and said, there's this woman, she's been calling in. She'd really like to start an El Sistema program where she is. Is Raleigh near Durham? And would that work out for you? And I was like, yes. I will definitely go meet with her. And we met, and the rest is really history. And I have to say, I, I would say for the most successful projects, that is how it goes, where there's hard work for sure, but there's an alignment of timing, opportunity, resources, and good luck. And that is where you begin to see true success, where there's a great book that I would highly encourage your listeners to read. It's called Good to Great, and it's Jim Collins. And he talks about the flywheel, which is that you are definitely pushing a boulder at the beginning, But if the boulder is rolling downhill, you get momentum, and you begin to see all of your work align, and partners come on board to meet you where their hard work is now meeting where you have arrived at this point, so that a new opportunity is created and can be built upon. And truly that has been the success of Kidznotes in being aware of and smart about aligning our growth and our priorities with the priorities of good partners, and with opportunities where it's ripe for change.
Right.
And I feel like being a good listener and being in tune to the opportunities in your community and the opportunities around you is crucial. That is the single best path forward to success.
I love that, listening to, what people want around you. That's a really good piece of advice.
Yeah.
So tell me, what was it like to introduce low income kids to this art form, like that they've never been exposed to in their lives? What was that like?
Yeah. It's funny to think about it that way. I don't think about it that way anymore. Really, it's introducing just kids to music that is awesome and that I love,
Right.
and that a lot of people love, and that, once introduced to it, many people fall in love with classical music and this idea of creating something that is all their own.
Mm-hmm.
And truly, one of the only things that is missing in low income communities is access. It's just access and opportunity. There's no other barrier. There's no barrier of understanding or
Right.
creativity or passion or desire. It truly, the only barrier is access.
Great. That's awesome. This is so exciting that you got that. Are there other El Sistemas around? Like you said, it was international. Are there a lot in this country that people have started, just like Kidznotes?
Yeah, there are. And I'm actually beginning a new job this summer. I'm going to be the national director for El Sistema USA,
Oh,
which
wow.
is a association. It's a membership association and network that supports the 120 El Sistema inspired programs across the country. So we've got about every major city covered in the country. There are El Sistema programs in nearly every state, and we're serving almost 40,000 kids this year annually.
Wow.
An exciting part about this next step for me is that I get to stay in North Carolina. So El Sistema USA has had no home, and I have brought it to Duke University so that we'll be incubated there as essentially a nonprofit partner with the university, teaming up with several departments, including an important one called the Social Sciences Research Institute, where we will conduct national research on the impact of El Sistema nationally and then also locally in regional communities.
Wow, this is really growing.
Yes, it is. It is truly a movement. I get inquiries and letters every day from new communities and people across the United States who want to begin El Sistema inspired programs. One of the things that has been interesting to compare the growth in Venezuela versus the United States is that we are a bootstraps people. So we are the consummate entrepreneur. No one wants a government funded, nationally regulated program. Everyone wants their own thing that is relevant to their community. So everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, and everyone wants to, build something that is unique to their talent and skills, and that is unique to serving their community, which I think is great. It means, yeah, versus El Sistema in Venezuela, which totally is top down. Started in Caracas, then is brought out to the different communities across the country. They even train all the teachers centrally in Caracas and then kind of send them out as disciples into different parts of Venezuela. And what that makes is a very kind of homogenized and well organized system where everybody's playing the same curriculum. They have essentially the same school of thought. I would think of it much like the way we think of like our orchestras and conservatories, where you have a Cleveland orchestra sound or a New York sound and kind of a New York's way of teaching and a Cleveland way of teaching,
Right.
or a Boston way of teaching. It's the same, so that there's only truly one way of teaching in Venezuela, because in El Sistema, because it all started at the center, and then those master teachers on each instrument taught everybody else, and then they get farmed out across the country of Venezuela. Now, mind you, Venezuela is the size of Texas, so it's a much smaller landscape and bandwidth. And what I find is really interesting about the El Sistema movement in the United States is the variety. It's fascinating. There's so many different ways that people are approaching violin instruction or brass instruction or percussion. There's so many different ways people are approaching ensemble building. It's really amazing.
Wow, that's so great. So if there's someone listening, who wants to start an El Sistema, they would just, in their area, they could contact you. And now that it's, you're in charge of it, of the whole like nationwide thing, they can get in touch with you, right?
Absolutely. So on our website, elsistemausa.org, we have a map. And on that map are both El Sistema USA members and non-members. Part of my work as the new national director is to grow our membership and to really create some definitions around what it means to be part of El Sistema USA. But yes, if you're a person in your community, in any community across the country who wants to get an El Sistema program going, I would first encourage you to think about what partners you might work with in your community to scale that program, so that you're not trying to start something from your house or from one church. I would think more about school system partners or charter school partners or Parks and Rec partners. How can you really think about getting your program to scale?
Right.
Excuse me. Talking makes me cough.
So yeah, that's great, because I'm sure, at some point someone might be listening to this and say, I would love to do this. So one thing that I want to talk about, because musicians always, they need employment, and this is your employment. And so how did it work where, when you first started, in order for you to get paid? Because I know that, you have to raise money for the programs and pay people to teach, but you've been doing all this training and all to get it started. So how does that work with getting yourself paid? And do you make enough money now whereas that's your income, that's your entire income? I guess that was like a multi-faceted question, but yeah, that's my question. Do you make enough money? And like, how do you, how can you, as you're growing this, how you're educating yourself to do it, how do you support yourself?
So I would say any entrepreneur always pays themselves last. So that is also how I began. Mm-hmm. I set up some systems. So we're a nonprofit, and at the beginning, I set up some systems with the board of directors to put benchmarks for me and the organization along the way, where I could be paid essentially enough, a living wage as we got started. But then if we did really well, I would get a bonus on the end, so that it would more closely reflect my compensation as the executive director, would more closely reflect the size of our budget. Mm-hmm. As I shared at the beginning, we raised twice the size of our budget. So we doubled, we surpassed our goals by 100% in the first year. And so I, received then a salary that was more commensurate with a $300,000 budget as opposed to a $150,000 budget. Mm-hmm. And I have really used that approach as we've grown. I've also thought carefully about what resources can I bring to the table that are non-cash. So some of the big ways that we've been able to scale is through our partnership with the public school systems, in that we team up with the music teacher in 12 public schools, and that teacher teaches the Kidznotes curriculum with a Kidznotes teacher, and then the school pays them. So at this point, Kidznotes is a budget of $1 million, and we're receiving about $100,000 in-kind support from our school systems in salaries that we don't have to pay, that get paid by somebody else to teach our curriculum, but we're not responsible for raising that money.
That's cool.
Which is great. So I would encourage people who are thinking about this or thinking about starting any kind of business to think about non-cash resources that can cover some of your costs without you having to raise every single dollar. I also received a lot of training in fundraising, and have definitely approached business development as a lifelong learning path, so that I'm always educating myself. I'm always reading. I'm always attending webinars. I'm always reaching out to mentors and asking them for their ideas and advice, to think about ways to both grow and sustain Kidznotes.
Right.
I make a very good salary now, so I earn what an executive director earns for $1 million budget. So Kidznotes budget this year is $1 million, which puts us in the top 5% of all nonprofits in North Carolina.
Wow.
And we've got, we have a staff of 40. So we have a staff of 50. So we have 40 teachers who are independent contractors who are working in the schools. We're moving those teachers to become part-time employees next year because we believe in them, and we now have a sustainability behind us that we can project more into the future than in years past, because we're only in our 7th year this year. And we've got 10 full and part-time administrative staff. So it's 50 people, including me and all of our teachers and all of our staff.
Wow, you've grown fast.
Yes, it has been like a rocket ship. One of my supporters was comparing the growth of Kidznotes to a tech startup, to like a Silicon Valley, tech startup, because really we have grown 1,000% since our first year budget.
So, now that you've had this experience with working with Kidznotes versus when you were working within the education system of the North Carolina Symphony, what do you think music education needs going into the future? As far as, because I know you brought black violin in recently, and that must have had just such a great impact on kids, just because, it's popular music, and that brings in a whole other aspect. And besides the fact that I have a whole opinion about how awesome that is just to bring other genres into like classical instruments. But besides that, okay, I'm putting like 3 questions together in one, but what do you think, what do you think music education needs going into the future for kids?
So one thing that I think is really important is that it is nimble. So music education needs to think about, I think, really returning to the roots of music, which is expression. It really is all about expression and creativity, and thinking about a way for students to get their voice out. And so in order to do that, you've really got to approach every day, every classroom, every setting, every concert with a fresh perspective, and that, I think, that takes real discipline. It takes a discipline to always thinking about what is a new way of looking at this, and refrain from falling back on routine, I think. So I feel like it's crucial. There are multiple steps to this in my experience. One is that openness to expression. The other is a real commitment to mastery, and that requires a routine. But I think in that routine of practice, you've got to approach it with a creative and relevant and mindful approach to teaching it differently every day, because every day is different. And having a real understanding of good quality teaching, understanding both what that means when you're doing it and when you're seeing it or experiencing it.
Mm-hmm.
And also thinking about the creativity that is required and the nimbleness that is required in order to be reactive to the classroom or to that student. I think where music education really begins to fail us is when we try and do it the same way that we have always tried. That, when we're really falling back on, oh, well, there's this great curriculum and it's tried and true, and, you should really do everything this way. I mean, one example is like the Suzuki method. Amazing method, fantastic platform for creativity. But I feel like you've got to approach the Suzuki method with fresh eyes, with a fresh perspective, with a different approach for every single student that you take through it, and encourage that student and all of the teachers that you're teaching to think about it as a tool in order to accomplish the much bigger goal, which is creativity and expression. It's the much bigger goal is creativity, expression, mastery, and moving someone, really inspiring others to care, to be moved, and to think about the world differently. Because what are we doing in creating the arts, if in making art at all, if we're not trying to change people's minds? Why on earth are we doing this at all if there's no further point beyond just creating great art?
Yes. And I really think you hit the nail on the head. And when your kids played with black violin, I was there, and it was so inspiring to see how they enjoyed it,
Yeah.
just the way
Yeah.
that it went. It was like,
And beyond enjoying it, for me, what it meant in that moment was that they now have this experience of, I belong on stage.
yes,
That's my future is going to be on stage. So if I want to do this for the rest of my life, this is an option for me. Because all these people are cheering for me. I've worked really hard to be here. I belong on stage. And if they think that, then good Lord, what else can we teach them to think,
Yeah, it was so fun to see how they got into it. And it was really inspiring. And I know the audience felt the same way. I brought a friend, and she was like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Like, you got to not only did you get to introduce Kidznotes to a bunch of people who've never heard of it, but at the same time, they got to, it was just a win-win-win all around. It was really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tracy. It was I had a lot of fun too. It was an amazing night. The kids are still jamming.
I bet they are. So,
Yeah, all about it.
On my podcast, I always ask guests to share their defining moment, like their crossroads moment where they, had an opportunity to go in another direction, and it was definitely a less safe route. And I know we've been talking about this all the time, but can you think of a moment where it was really like, this is it. I have to take the plunge, and it was really scary. Can you think of a moment like that?
Yeah. And for me, it was it was one of real pain. Obviously, I and my parents and my teachers had all invested a lot of money and time into preparing me for orchestra auditions.
Yeah.
And I have a nice viola. I have had private lessons my whole life. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Towards this idea of making a career out of being a professional classical musician.
Yeah.
And I wrote my teacher at the time, Bob Vernon, who was the principal of the Cleveland Orchestra. I wrote him this long email, and I wrote him and I apologized. And I just said, I'm so sorry. I have to let you know that I am pursuing this other opportunity. I'm going to start this executive training fellowship because I've decided to stop taking orchestra auditions. And I really want to explore this path and see how it's going. And you have invested so much in me, and you and I have spent so much time together on the viola, preparing me to take auditions and to play well, that I just feel like I've wasted your time, and I have to apologize. And I've apologized. My parents are angry. I've apologized to my parents, blah, blah, blah. And he wrote me back, and all he said was, Katie, you're being ridiculous. this is the moment that we have been preparing you for. And that like blew me away. And he went on to say, all of your preparation, all of your hard work, discipline, dedication, intense practice, understanding of excellence, pursuit of mastery has prepared you for exactly this decision, to then start down this path and begin a new way of thinking about the way that music can change lives. And you could not have arrived here any other way. And you are now totally prepared. And I'm thrilled to have played a hand in that preparation. And it totally changed my mind. It just opened my mind to this idea that anything that you do with a true passion and follow through and commitment has deep impact on the entirety of your life. That whether you're working in music, or you're building a home, or you're, I don't know, like working really hard at saving money for something, like anything that you do where you're working hard and have a commitment and a plan, and you accomplish a series of goals, has significant impact on the rest of your life in all aspects of your life. And it made me feel like a whole person again, because I had felt very divided, and it helped me to see that all of it is one thing. All of this work is just, it's just all about improving yourself and improving society and advancing us all forward.
That is a tremendous perspective, Katie, because, I think you're right. We get so compartmentalized, like I'm doing this one thing. It's preparing for an audition. I have to play perfectly. This is my entire skill set and only goal in life. And it's too limiting.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And I think it can be really depressing to think about it that way. I think, and this is just my opinion, that's where a lot of dissatisfaction comes from.
Totally.
With particularly orchestral musicians, where they feel like this is all they can do. And the orchestra world continues to hem them in. We can only play this many services. We can only play this kind of music. We can't record anything. We can't experiment with anything. And if you feel like that's all you have to offer, and you keep getting like boxed in and boxed in and boxed in, that's horrible. Yeah. It just is totally emaciating, really. I mean, it's horrible.
That's a good word to use. And, it's funny. This is really striking a nerve for me, actually, because going into this project, Building Crushing Classical, and this movement is really, the goal of it is exactly what we're talking about right now. Just getting everyone to understand that there's so much more than just their ability to play their instrument, because of who we are. We're people that all bring something different to the table, some different kind of passion or, goal, and it doesn't have to be this narrow thing. And I can tell you that right before I started this, I was in that place where I'm like, wow, I only have this one skill, and I'm not really that happy doing this thing that I've sort of painted myself into a corner to do,
Yeah, totally.
So that was a great story. I'm so glad your teacher is so enlightened. It
was a huge moment. And then of course I was able to call my parents and be like, see, I'm fine. It's all going to be fine.
They were upset.
Don't worry.
They were upset with you?
They were upset because everybody was on that train. Like everybody had, they had helped me prepare for auditions. They had, it was funny in the summer that I won the spot with the Youth Orchestra of the Americas, which of course then set me on this path to a whole different life. I also won a faculty position at Eastern Music Festival, and I turned it down. And my dad was like, "Wait a minute, you turned down a paid faculty position that would employ you for years into the future in order to go to Venezuela for free and like have this 1 year experience?" And I was like, yes. Yeah. So it has been a winding road. But it is, I'm really happy. It is totally fulfilling. And I hope
Great.
that musicians listening think about all of the potential inside of them that the world has not yet seen because they've been limiting themselves to one path. And I would love for the world to just explode with their new ideas and new contributions
Oh, totally. And it's such a
through
contribution.
rethinking. Yeah.
Yes, and you're building something. I mean, that's the coolest thing is that you're building something now that will have an impact like for a really long time. So it's just,
Yeah.
it's inspiring.
Yeah. Thank you. That's what I love about our work is education and working with young people was something that I didn't know was going to be my passion, but it really is. And I think it's because I want the boat to be rocked forever. I want a new generation of all new people always coming to the fore with new ideas and to listen to them and to empower them and to try and hold on to that, because I feel like you're right, Tracy. We started off at the beginning talking about how as we age, we get a little bit more set in our ways, or you have other constraints, family,
Yeah.
finances, that prevent you from being as adventurous or as risky as you might have been when you're younger, which is why I feel like young leaders are really important. Youth voice and having people who still have those risk opportunities, being in positions to make waves. I think it's
Yes.
important.
Oh, totally. Yeah, when you're young and you just don't care because you don't have anything tying you down yet. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
totally different. It's a
yeah,
different
it
place
is.
in life, so
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
perfect opportunity.
yeah.
That's great. So, tell me what habit or behavior have you developed in your life that has made the most difference in your career so far?
That's an excellent question. Um, One thing a habit and behavior that I bring to everything that I do is who else can benefit? So I'm always thinking about in whatever I'm doing, who else can benefit or who else can contribute to this idea. So anything new or even anything that is already in place,
Hmm.
always reapproaching and thinking about how can I expand this network and think about how to grow this concept or this idea. And that is also from a habit of essentially what we talk about in education is growth mindset, so that you're always thinking about what's the next thing that I can learn from this opportunity. And how can once I learn that, then how can I make changes and then improve it and expand it out? So it's a constant cycle of having a feedback loop. So that's a habit I put in place in my work life. It's also in my communication style, which is I've put this idea out there. We've tried it in X, Y, and Z ways. What did you think about that? How did that impact you? What difference did that make for you? How would you improve it? And then go back to it and put those changes in place and take it out to the next iteration. So I would say being iterative and experimental is a habit that I probably picked up from practicing and from being a musician, but also I just have like a relentless drive for quality and for excellence. And so it's really hard for me to ever finish anything because I want to I always want it to be better.
Yeah.
The discordant part about that though is that I also love accomplishing things. So there are a number of things where I get them out the door and it's good enough.
Yes.
And I think for me, the reason that it's good enough is because I know that there's always an opportunity to come back to it and make it better. So I guess that because I know that I approach life in an iterative way, even when I get this thing out the door, I'll come back around to it and check in on it and make sure it's doing well and then make changes and improve. So it's kind of like, and there's another book I have loved to read, Steve Jobs' book, that the anything about Apple or technology,
Hmm.
everything, the whole concept of updates and using your technology where one piece fits into another piece and it's always building on itself and always improving on itself. It's the same concept where there's no set model ever. It's always changing.
I love that because it gives you, there's the, I guess, the balance between perfectionism, but always getting it out the door as well, or getting it out the
Yeah.
door at least, because sometimes you can stay in that place of not getting anything done or anything presented or put out in front of people because you want it to be too perfect. Kind of like that, I need to stay in
Yeah.
the practice room until everything is perfect kind of way, and then you're afraid to get out there. So there's got to be a
Yeah.
balance between those two things. And I like that concept of updates or checking back on it. Like, it's
Yeah.
not done just because it's out. It's just out because
Yeah.
you want to get stuff
Because
out,
it's
right?
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think too, it's the very social part of me. I'm very much a networking and social advancement leader. I'd say that is definitely how I approach life, which is
Yeah.
that I just want to know what people think. Like, I really want to know. I really
Yeah.
want to know, what do you think about this? So keeping something, I just can't do it. And sometimes I get it out there too early and it looks like crap, and then I'm not proud of it, and that's, you know, the yang to
Right.
that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. So I have one more question for you. Who in the classical world inspires you, and tell me why in one sentence?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I have to say Yo-Yo Ma inspires me. And it is because he is an amazing musician and he has also dedicated his life to using music to unite people. All of the work that he's doing with the Silk Road Project, with all of his citizen artist work, Yo-Yo Ma truly has built a community around. He's built like a new art form, I think,
Yeah,
around using art to engage and bring ideas to the forefront.
I agree. I love what he's done and what he continues to do.
Yeah,
So great.
yeah. The other person, of course, I would plug is Gustavo Dudamel. He's
Yes.
amazing. He's amazing, and I thought that one seemed too obvious for my whole passion with El Sistema. But yeah, certainly Gustavo.
Yeah, he's great too. Thank you so much, Katie. This has been such a fun interview. I really appreciate you coming on and taking time out of your day to talk with us, talk with me.
It's exciting, Tracy. Thank you for what you're doing. I'm excited to follow the podcast.
Thank you. And if you out there in listening land are enjoying the podcast, please write a review on iTunes and join us on the conversation on facebook.com/crushing classical. And I'm on Instagram as well as Crushing Classical. And I look forward to hearing from you. And thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Bye.